Welcome everyone. My name is Jongbloedt. I'm a field CTO at PDS. Today we're going to be talking a little bit about my take and viewpoint of technologies that we should be investigating in 2021. But before I get started with that, I just want to have a little bit of a opening around. I cover a lot of different accounts, whether you're in healthcare or education or the energy sector, financial, generic enterprise, you name it. I cover a lot of different account bases. So what I'll be talking about today is going to be a bit general across all of those fields. And if you're in manufacturing or other areas, we can also talk about how those apply to your situation and how your company operates. The biggest thing that most of the customers that I've worked with over the last 6 to 9 months is just the disruption of our workforce. We all know what that disruption is. Whether you can or can't get into the office, needing to get more people into manufacturing facilities. Whatever the case is, we know that from an IT perspective, this is one of the #1 things that we can help our enterprise support is that disruption. And one of the biggest components of that disruption is the remote workforce. So when we talk about remote workforce, we're talking about all of our employees that are working from home today, or were working from home and are starting to return back into the office. We made a lot of changes within our environment to accommodate that situation that happened. So whether you improve your existing VPN connectivity, you increase the amount of connections that you can handle. We had some customers that went and bought SaaS-based solutions to integrate into public clouds. Regardless of how you did it, that was some challenges that we went through a handful of months ago to improve that remote workforce and that disrupted workforce. The numbers on the next couple graphs aren't numbers that we need to dig down in deep and understand what they mean. The reality really is, if we look at our business impact, we know that at almost every sector of business out there, there's been impact. If you're a manufacturer building HVAC systems, your business is busier than you can handle right now. And there's other segments like education where we're doing distance learning. No matter what the situation is, we have business impact. So as we start to plan for 2021, my call out is to investigate what your actual business impact is, what your business executives are doing about that, and what their plans are for next year to address those issues in particular. Because we start talking about how we want to handle things in 2021, it needs to be a whole lot more than we have 5-year-old servers that we want to refresh. We want to take a much deeper dive into how those things are. So evaluating what our business is doing and how they're tackling the next 12 months is going to be key to our success. And then to talk a little bit about some solutions that we've seen out there. Obviously, we're seeing temp scan screenings when we come into some facilities. We're seeing the most successful I've seen for manufacturing is actually doing pods within the manufacturing plant, where traditionally we'd have single entry doors and exit doors into a building. We're starting to use emergency exits for entrance and exits, and then containing the facility into segments, per se. In our world, DMZs, but in the industry, they're just kind of isolating components. So if you had 200 people in a manufacturing facility, we can split it into quarters, and those 50 people remain on one side, and all that kind of fun stuff. And then additional temp scanning to accommodate that. It's been great to see all the IoT solutions that have stepped up during that time frame. Technologies that weren't a big use case or understanding of why we'd use them came out from the woodworks and executed greatly. We also seen your remote VPN solutions skyrocketing. The use cases being used, obviously. For me personally, when I had my laptop at home, it was easy just to catch up with work. It wasn't to do my full-time job. That's rotated 180, and now I spend my entire time at home and VPNing in and connecting in. And then the most ironic thing is, if we look at the internet trend itself, it's not business. It's streaming connectivity. It's the lifestyle at home that we have. We've seen all sorts of businesses with an intense amount of internet bandwidth increasing over the last few months to support the work from home, be at home lifestyle. So to get started on how we can actually take what happened in 2020 and apply it for 2021, we need to take a few steps back, and I want to ask everyone to kind of think about things a little bit differently. This was an article that came out from Gartner before March of 2020. I think it came out in like November, December of 2019, actually. And I thought it was really ironic, the kind of the questions and the steps and the process through here. So if we just walk through this diagram real quick with me, if we pretend we're an insurance company and we want to understand that one of our business values is our customers, what we want to ask ourselves is, why do our customers like working with us? And if the answer on this particular example that was used back in late 2019 was, our customers prefer to deal with us in person, the question that we want to ask ourselves is to ask the question in a complete opposite manner of what we understand today, which is, our customers prefer to be anonymous and to be dealt with online. So if we were to trying to accommodate what we know our customers like today, and also try and apply something completely different that we haven't tried before, the outcome would be we should provide more online services. If this is something we would have done in 2018 as a financial services company, we would have had e-documents set up correctly, would have had integrations into Zoom, into some of our backend systems, we would have had all those components put together, wishful thinking. But if we would have had those components in place with that digital transformation, we would have been more prepared for what happened in 2020. Now, no one was really prepared for what happened, so that's totally understandable. But if we take a look at what we know and how we apply technology to those, and ask some questions in an opposite manner and do a workshop around that, you'll come up with some, I think, pretty interesting outcomes with how IT can help support our businesses in a different way than we used to. The other thing we want to kind of think about when we plan in the future is IT's done a fantastic job of doing disaster recovery. Where we've fallen down in the enterprise space is business continuity, which would be planning a DR versus a pandemic versus an epidemic. So our disaster recovery plans, we have active data centers, we might have standby data centers, we always have data off-site to support some of the issues I have on the screen today. If we have a power outage or a fire, all those kind of things, we're built to support those types of problems. It might not be the easiest thing to get through, but we have a plan for it. Business continuity, where we actually understand a little bit different viewpoint, a few more issues than what our DR plan normally has, we can go a whole lot further. And one other way to look at it is, if we were to take a time capsule back in time, and it's May of 2019, and we knew that in March we would ask all of our employees to work from home, how would we have done it different if we had 9 months to prepare for it versus -5 days to prepare for it? What would we have done differently? Have a workshop around that. Understand if the scenario happened again, or if we could go back in time and be ready for it, what would we have done differently, and how would we have done it differently, and how much better would the enterprise function if we were prepared for something like this? And even if we don't do all of those things, it's still a really good workshop, and still a really good lesson to understand what we would have done differently. So another kind of eye chart with a bunch of different items on here. And the message I want to add here again is not the numbers that are really behind this, but the actual change in the numbers that happen. So if you had budget for digital transformation, cybersecurity, cloud initiatives, security, automation, big data, if you had initiatives for all these things in 2020, what we need to look at is what changed compared to the outcome that we thought we were going to do in the beginning of the year to where we are now. We've seen a lot of digital transformation increase tremendously. I talked about a number of them. Banking industries. There's banks that we've worked with that had great digital transformation plans in place to help automate the tellers and be more interactive and videoing with the tellers and all those kind of things to make the experience better. Those banks that were in the beginning of those phases executed them dramatically faster than they ever could have thought. Plans that were 18 months out in the making were done in 3 or 4 weeks to make the experience as best as they could. And some of them were fortunate to have some of those technologies in place. They spent a ton of money and investment in digital transformation. And generally when that happens, something else sacrifices. So maybe in that scenario, their cloud first vision deteriorated, or automation deteriorated, or cloud, or any of the cybersecurity deteriorated in those situations. So what we want to do is evaluate what happened in 2020 and take a look at what still needs to happen for 2021 or even late 2020, and figure out what needs to be done. Some other great examples that we've seen on the cybersecurity standpoint is just getting out of some of the components of cybersecurity. Maybe we always wanted to have a SOC, but that's just even more difficult than ever now. So let's do a SOC as a service. All those situations are very important. So understanding what we did plan on doing in 2020, and then figuring out what still should have happened, but we had to move things around to accommodate the environment that we're in today. So with all those things in mind, we want to take a look at what the business is trying to do. We want to take a look at what we did do. We want to take a look at what we did not do in 2020. End user experience is going to be key with a lot of the stuff that I'm talking to with customers, making sure that our employees, which are typically one of the most expensive components that we have in a business, are as most efficient as we can make them. Ask the questions to your help desk, ask questions to supervisors and end users. How's your experience been working from home versus in the office? Is it better? Is it worse? How are the applications performing? And we want details of which applications maybe are performing better or are performing worse. We want to investigate all those things because that's what we can really focus on in 2021 to get our businesses on track if they're not already. So what I want to move into is just a few technologies that I'm seeing customers heavily investing in or adding on to or starting from scratch. It doesn't really matter where you are. The first one I have on the screen here is just Sd-Wan in general. There's customers that have focused heavily on Sd-Wan, super happy with it, but they built it for the traditional enterprise footprint, meaning if you have 50 or 500 offices, we have Sd-Wan in those offices. Sd-Wan can go all the way down to the end user, right? Whether it's a software appliance that's running on your machine, it's just a normal VPN, integrating your Sd-Wan to your legacy VPN. There's a lot of different ways to improve upon that. We've even seen some customers where they deployed WAPs directly to end users so that when I'm working from home, I have my corporate Wi-Fi, any corporate Wi-Fi devices that I have in my possession operate just as if I was in the office. So if I have a cordless phone or any other sort of IoT devices, my laptop, my tablet, all those things can jump on the corporate Wi-Fi and maintain all the same security regardless of where I'm at. The other thing about Sd-Wan, which I'll talk a little bit, I believe, on a few more slides, is Sd-Wan is a great overlay to the connectivity that you already have. And what I've seen people forget about is if I put Sd-Wan in, it'll solve all of my connectivity issues. If I have two providers, I have redundancy, and I'm great. And in a B2B world, that is pretty much accurate. But when you start looking at end user to business connectivity, things are a lot different. What I mean by that is there's a lot of different internet providers out there that serve the regional areas where people work from home. And their connectivity to other internet providers may be different and vary from others. So making sure that we have proper connectivity in our data centers and in our public clouds back and forth to make sure that the Sd-Wan solution that we have can take the right paths based on the underlay or the actual carriers that we have. If you're using a public cloud solution, they probably already have done all that work for you and you're probably in really, really good shape. But if you're backhauling to your data centers, there's probably some improvements that we can make by analyzing the behavior and the traffic flows that you have for your mobile workforce. I have a few examples on this next slide here. So there's a couple different angles to take on this. The first is when we look at what we did in 2020, I saw a lot of enterprises shift workload to the cloud without a plan. Meaning, let's say you have a application update solution that was in your data center, and you didn't have the bandwidth to support that. Well, we moved those things into a public cloud. We moved that workload because that public cloud has that internet connectivity that I was talking about earlier to help serve all those regional locations and have kind of unlimited bandwidth at the same time. So we moved that out into the cloud. There's a couple problems with that. The first is we did it very, very fast. We didn't have a plan. And if we did have a plan, hopefully execute it correctly, and then everything I'm about to say is a waste. But what we want to make sure is we look back at those kind of quick decisions that we made in 2020 and understand if we did them the right way, if we would have had 6 months to plan it correctly. Did we build enough VPCs? Did we build too many? Did we overcomplicate things? Did we just pop VPCs in and put single applications in there? Can we collapse those VPCs and overlay a microsegmentation instead of relying on the VPCs and the complexes that they'll go? There's all sorts of different angles that we can look at. And microsegmentation has gotten so easy to deploy. I've had people at fear of deploying those tools because of the time and the investment. And the reality is there is an investment, but the time has been reduced to, let's say 1,000 servers in a month to microsegment with the appropriate tools and the appropriate attention to do it. We're not talking about an army of resources. We're talking about a few individuals that can analyze the output of the reports and bless those configurations. The other angle that we want to take when we look at kind of quick moves out to the cloud is what is our connectivity from our corporate data centers to our cloud, because we're in that hybrid model now. Do we need to do direct cross connects? Is our VPN site to sites, is that providing a good enough latency between our on-premise workloads and our public cloud workloads? So there's a lot of things that we want to look back at and understand, if we had the time to do it correctly, would we have made the same choices? And then make the appropriate changes and plan for them in the next 12 months. And then the next one is VDI, whatever you want to call it, Citrix. There's all sorts of great platforms out there to do remote desktop type solutions. We have customers that have tried and failed doing it. We have customers that have done it twice. We have customers that are not interested. The interesting thing with a VDI type solution is it's so much more important to evaluate whether it's right for you now compared to if it was right for you 2 years ago. VDI has been very, very powerful in the work from home workforce. They have older applications deployed. It's very low bandwidth. It does require good latency. And it's really easy for the engineering team to deploy those devices out there. We don't need powerful assets at the edge, at the home. They can use any device. There's all sorts of pros with the workforce working remotely. That said, these struggle with video, and there are some ways to solve those problems as well. Like your Zoom session that you're watching right now. If you're doing a native VDI solution, wouldn't work correctly if you just built a environment and slapped it in the public cloud provider and hoped that it would work. You'd struggle a little bit, but there's ways to solve those problems too. And if you're not interested in doing a VDI workload to render the entire desktop, maybe it makes sense to render just a couple applications that work a little more sluggishly when you're running over a VPN tunnel through residential internet. And if you don't solve any of those problems, then you're fine in those scenarios. But there's a definitely great opportunity to reevaluate if these types of technologies make sense, knowing that we will have some work from home for a while yet. So with that, I want to thank everyone for joining me today. And like I started in the beginning, if some of this stuff applied to you, but you want to focus in a little deeper on how it impacts your business vertical or the type of work you do, whether you're an engineer, an architect, CIO, CTO, and we can have these conversations explicitly around the challenges that you're up against in 2021. Thank you.